Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Moxxie Coaching Podcast. My name is Michelle, and I'll be your host as we explore what coaching is and how it can help you create your best life. If you're anything like me, it's important to you to give back in some way. Maybe it's volunteering in the soup kitchen. Maybe it's donating $1 million to environmental research. It doesn't really matter. I started coaching and podcasting because I'm just one person who can only do so much alone. And I realized that through coaching and through podcasting, I could help and support those of you who want to do good works and exponentially increase the amount of good that I'm able to do. So if this sounds like you, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Be well. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Moxxie Coaching Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate you all taking time out of your busy lives to spend a few minutes with me. This week we're going to talk about something that I would hazard a guess that anyone who has ever read the tarot has experienced, which is a card coming up that makes absolutely no flippin' sense. I know you know what I'm talking about. You're doing your reading, everything is going along hunky-dory, and you flip a card that just blows your mind. A card that makes no sense in the context of your reading, or you think makes no sense in the context of your reading. What do we do when that happens? No, we don't choose a different card, although it is very tempting. No, we also do not gather up all of the cards thinking that maybe we didn't shuffle well enough, or maybe we weren't concentrating hard enough. No. We have to deal with the cards that are in front of us. Those cards came up for a reason. And so while sure you can start all over again, you're not necessarily going to get the information that was originally truly meant for you. The first thing I suggest you do when this comes up for you is talk your way through the card. So for example, and I'm verbally speak it. Don't write it down, speak it. Talk about what's going on in the card. Talk about what you feel. Talk about what you intuit. You might not want to do this is because the more you do that, the more you get into a situation where it's like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to start over. Or, oh, this card doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to pull a different one. It sets you up in a way to be lazy. I did this myself when I first started learning how to read the tarot. It's like, oh, I don't understand what that means. So yeah, sometimes I would start all over. I would say, oh, I must not have been concentrating well enough. Or, oh, I know, I didn't shuffle the cards well enough. That's what the problem is. There was always some reason that when it came up as a card that I didn't recognize, I always had some reason or rationale for it, and I would start over. And by doing that, it made me lazy in a way, or no, lazy is not the best way to put it. It prevented me from putting myself out there and actually working through what the card means. So it's okay. I'm a geek. I love crossword puzzles. It's like a crossword puzzle. The first time you look at the answer, right? The first time you cheat, you feel bad. But then, oh, I've already cheated once. So I can just look back and again, and I can look back again, and it just gets easier. And so rather than pushing ourselves to come up with an appropriate interpretation, we wimp out and just start over. If this is you, and it might not be you anymore, but I bet it was you at some point, I'm encouraging you, really strongly encouraging you to sit in the not being completely sure of what this card means and why it's there for you. After you have just spent a minute or two with the card, just noticing what's there for you, even if what's there for you is, oh shit, I don't know what this means, that's okay. Now, once you've done that, I want you to take the card and I want you to talk your way through it. For example, let's take a look at the Five of Cups. Excuse me. So I pull up the Five of Cups. It makes no sense in my reading. Let's say that I just start talking about the card. All right, there is what looks like a man standing there, and his head is down, so he's probably sad, or he's hiding, or for some reason does not want us to see his face. He has a long, dark cape on, which is this makes me feel he's trying to protect himself, like he's trying to cover himself up in some way. At this man's feet, there are 3 cups, and they're turned over. And whatever was in those cups, I can see has spilled out. Behind him, there are 2 cups that are still standing. But it doesn't look to me like he can see those cups because he's got his back to them. He also has his back to the bridge that is his pathway across to the house that's here in the background. And I feel like if he would just turn around and notice that those cups are there, maybe he wouldn't feel so bad. And maybe if he would notice that he's not all alone, that he can cross that bridge and seek out some help, maybe he would feel better. All right, so we took that card, we broke it down into just the basic elements. And sometimes by doing that, it will provide us a light bulb. Sometimes it's a logical brain-based light bulb, sometimes it's an intuitive one. So for example, when I'm talking about his spilled cups, I could be thinking to myself, in what way does this relate to me? Oh, I'm feeling a sense of loss over X, Y, or Z. And I'm also noticing that I have a tendency to be maybe hyper-focused on the bad stuff, and I'm not giving myself a chance to notice some of the good things. So we just talked our way through the card, and by doing that, you can clue yourself in and try to think of how it applies to the situation. You might even want to consider pretending that you are the person in the card. That clearly only works for cards where there are people, but in the Rider-Smith-Waite deck, most of the cards have people. And so putting yourself in the position of the person in the card, or what you would interpret or perceive as the position of the person in the card, it will probably help you. It's not necessarily going to help you articulate any more clearly what's in the card visually, but it may help you tap into and notice where what's in that card is related to what's going on with you. Now, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. It's going to depend on the card, but in general, the Rider-Smith-Waite deck was created to be very visually stimulating. It was created to tell a story with each card and try to use it that way, I guess, is what I'm saying. Okay, let's do another one that's maybe not so clearly, what's the word I'm looking for? One that's not so blatant. Let's do a card that's a little bit more challenging. All right, so we're going to talk about the Two of Swords. The Two of Swords is an image of a woman sitting on a concrete bench. She has two what appear to be very heavy, huge swords that she has, one in each hand. She's got her arms crossed over her chest and she's holding up these really big, heavy swords. Behind her is the water, and the water is symbolic of what? Do you remember? Intuition. Water is often symbolic of creativity and intuition. Swords, if you remember, are about ideas, thoughts, concepts, those types of things. And she's also got a blindfold on. And when we have a blindfold, clearly we can't see. We're not seeing something. So to tease the meaning of this card out of the card itself, it's a little bit more challenging because you need to know some of the symbolism. Knowing the basics, just the very basics about your swords, about your suits, your swords, your cups, your pentacles, and your wands. If nothing else, just knowing what each of those means, what each of the suits means, and being able to parse what's going on in the card is going to point you in the right direction. So basically what I'm saying is that we're taking the image and we're gleaning as much as we can from the image. And we're looking at it from not necessarily a logical perspective when we're talking through what's going on. We're just speaking from a what is perspective. And a lot of times you will find that when you're just speaking from that what if perspective, or what is perspective, I'm sorry, you will find that things start coming out of your mouth that you didn't necessarily logically process in your brain. And so basically, what is it? That's an intuitive download, right? And that's how I really discovered that I was good at reading the cards, is by doing it this way when I was starting out. And then I was noticing as I was talking my way through the cards, as I was articulating, maybe putting myself in the position of the person in the card, looking at the symbolism and all of those things, that's when I started to see or hear intuitive things coming out of my mouth that made a lot of sense. And so what I'm saying is, in a certain way, this putting yourself in the card and discussing what's going on, I don't know, the best way I can describe it is like a mental surrender, where you're not working to actively process with your brain what's going on. You're opening up a door and seeing what's going to walk through it. So where we're landing is a couple different places. Number one, talk through the card. Talk through all of the possibilities. Talk about what you talk about, how it makes you feel, and just allow that to flow. Just allow it to come out. Also, remember to look at your basics, the basics that we talked about way back in the very beginning podcast episodes about the suits. You'll get a lot of information about what the card means just based on the suit. Is it a major arcana or is it a minor arcana? How important is this card really? Is it a court card? And if it's a court card, does it represent me? Does it represent someone else? How about remembering some of my basic numerology? Ones are beginnings, tens are endings, odd numbers are sometimes a little bit more less steady, a little more chaotic sometimes. Even numbers are more controlled, more reliable, more all of those kinds of things. There are so many different things that we've talked about that you can pull back into how you do your readings and synthesize all of those pieces. Now, a couple more things. Intuition. Intuition will not beat you over the head to try to tell you something. Your intuition is going to sneak in there. It's going to say what it needs to say. It's going to back right out without sometimes you even recognizing that's what it is. Let your intuition flow. You might even want to consider recording your reading. And don't record it for anybody else. Just record it for yourself, because that's when you're going to find those little gems and those little jewels that are intuitive, because you're just talking, they just pop out, you're moving on, and going back and listening to those is a great way to, number one, check your work. I don't really want to call it that, but that kind of thing. Was there anything that you missed? And opening up your intuition. So just letting it flow. The last technique I bring up is to pull a clarifier card. And I bring it up last because I don't want you to automatically, instinctually, quickly flip over an additional card if you find a card doesn't make sense. It's that same thing with the crossword puzzle. It's once you cheat a little bit, and I'm not saying that pulling a clarifier is cheating, but once you do it, it makes it easier to pull additional cards. And I will tell you honestly, sometimes the additional cards will confuse you even more. So be aware of that. At the most, pull 2. I would say that even better, you want to just pull 1. And you can feel free to pull a clarifier card for each card that doesn't make sense. You don't have to pull a clarifier card for the full reading. So you can pull more than one. But my point being, put yourself through doing the work before you check your work. All right, so I skipped all over the place. Let's see if we can bring this back into some sort of cohesive form here. So the things that you can do when a card comes up that doesn't make any sense. Number one, just accept that it doesn't make any sense, because sometimes that happens. Number two, talk your way through the card. Talk your way through each aspect of it. When you're talking your way through it, if you are not familiar with the basics, the foundations of the cards yet, don't worry about it. If you remember the suits and how those impact a card, remember the major and minor, pull up from your memory all of the basic foundational stuff that you've already learned. The suit, is it a major or a minor? Is it a court card? Is numerology a factor here? Can numerology help me figure anything out? And again, I know I preach the Rider-Smith weight deck, and I don't care for it. I really don't. But it is the absolute best deck for doing this. As a beginner, you can get the gist of what's going on by simply looking at the card and talking your way through the card. And then as your knowledge grows, you're adding all of this extra context that you have, the suits, the majors, the minors, all of those things. Clearly, another thing is keep your intuition channels open. Try not to judge what's coming out of your mouth as you're speaking. Just let it flow and go back and listen to it later and find those gems. And then lastly, if you're really feeling stuck or really frustrated, pull a clarifier card and do the same thing with the clarifier card that you did with the first one. Talk your way through it, see what makes sense, put it into context, all of those different types of things. I want to talk a little bit about what seems to be contradictory advice in some ways. So I talk a lot about opening up to your intuition, about listening to your intuition, following what your gut has to say when it comes to the tarot and all of that. And I 100% believe it. And I am the type of person who finds a lot of value in the structure of the tarot. We're balancing out all of this very, you can consider it academic, very content that you need to internalize if you want to be extremely fluent in the tarot and read for other people. You really do need to know some of the basics. If you're using the tarot, if you're using oracle decks, that's a different conversation. What I'm saying is do your best to blend the concrete knowledge that you have gained through the podcast, through whatever books, all of those things, the concrete knowledge of the tarot and how it works, blend that with your intuition as much as possible. And I think what you'll find is, especially as you talk your way through the cards, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes, the easier it becomes, the less stupid you feel. When you first start out, you're just going to feel, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. But you'll get over it. You'll get used to hearing your voice on video or on audio. And I think that you will gain a lot from doing that. Now, you're going to notice that if you've listened to any of the other episodes where I have posted a live reading that I've done for someone, I talk through the cards. And I do that for a couple reasons. I do it, number one, because I don't want to make any assumptions about the knowledge base of the person that I'm reading for. If somebody doesn't know, then I don't want to just sit there and say a tall, dark, handsome stranger is coming your way. I want to be able to articulate that to them and what I'm seeing in the card. And by doing it that way, again, that's how I figured out the intuitive part. And that's how I have noticed when I go back and listen to readings that I have done, or if someone asks me a question after I finished a reading, a lot of times I don't remember what the heck I said. And that's okay. It's all recorded. And a lot of the time I don't remember what I said because it was just downloading. It was just coming in and I was talking and I wasn't throttling what was coming out of my mouth. I didn't judge what was coming out of my mouth. I just let it flow. And by doing it that way, I noticed how the intuition steps in and takes over for the logic, or takes over for the nuts and bolts of the foundational part of the tarot. I'm hoping that makes sense. So yeah, that is it. It's a lot to digest, I know, and all of this is stuff that takes a while. This is a process. And I keep talking to so many people, oh, I think the tarot is so cool, but I'm too lazy to learn it. And I am here to tell you that if you really want to learn the tarot, do it. And this is a great way to do it because it's putting yourself in the hot seat right away, and you will grow your skills very quickly if you can go back and listen and critique what you've done. And now I recognize that this is not for everybody. Some people are interested in the tarot just for kind of kicks, and it's fun and it's interesting. And you're the folks that are going to tune in when I do the monthly horoscope, or not horoscope, the monthly tarot reading for the collective. That's great, no problem. But for those of you who are really truly interested in using the tarot in a way that supports you personally, this is a fantastic way to do it. And honestly, it's pretty much the way I do it. I started out with the nuts and bolts, and then I moved on to blending in and growing the intuition. And I have found that the combination of the two really makes for some powerful readings. And I want you to have that same power to look into your own stuff and to figure out, where you want to go and what you want to do. And yeah, that's what this episode is all about. So don't give up when you see a difficult card. Keep working at it. Go through your checklist. And absolute worst case scenario, leave the reading. Leave it sitting there for a day if you can. And come back to it, because a lot of times you'll notice that a card maybe doesn't make sense in the moment, but something occurs over the course of that day or whatever that turns on the light bulb. It's like, yeah, that's why that card came up. It made absolutely no sense to me until did this or said that. So just be aware and remember that this is an art, not a science, even though it has some kind of cool sciencey stuff in it. Okay? All right, guys. You have a fantastic week. Next week will be, next week is going to be another forecast for the collective and individual mini tarot readings for each sign. And we will pull our next winner for the free reading next week, I think. I'll have to check. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. It was really fun to try to articulate this to you. And I'm hoping that even if just one of these little techniques helps you work through, that mind-blowing sensation when a card makes no sense, then I will feel like I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. All right, gang. Take care. Bye-bye.